Have you ever dreamt of owning a property and renting it out? It's been a popular way to build wealth for years, but the landscape of the UK property market is changing, and not necessarily for the better, especially for landlords. Being a landlord is no longer a guaranteed way to make easy money. In fact, more and more landlords are finding themselves grappling with rising costs, increasingly complex regulations, and a whole new set of challenges they didn't sign up for. This video is about understanding the very real struggles facing UK landlords today. We'll delve into the reasons behind the exodus we're seeing, explore the financial and emotional toll it's taking, and ask the question, is being a landlord still a viable investment in today's world? The numbers speak for themselves. Recent reports suggest a significant surge in the number of landlords choosing to sell up and leave the market. This isn't just a blip. It's a trend that's been building for a while now. Why are landlords leaving? Well, it's complicated, but in a nutshell, they're being squeezed from all sides. Rising interest rates mean their mortgages are costing more. New regulations require costly upgrades to their properties, and on top of that, they're dealing with the fallout of a cost of living crisis affecting their tenants. It's easy to paint landlords as faceless corporations, but the reality is many are everyday people who invested in property as a pension plan or a way to provide for their families. They're feeling the pinch just like everyone else. This isn't just about profit margins, it's about people's livelihoods, their retirement plans, and the future of the UK housing market. So let's dive in and take a closer look at the challenges they're facing. One of the biggest blows to landlords has been the sharp rise in interest rates. Interest rates go up and down to control inflation. But for landlords remortgaging buy-to-let properties, it's a real kick in the teeth. Higher monthly mortgage payments eat into rental income, making it harder to break even or make a profit. Some are pushed into the red, forced to sell or subsidize. Others increase rents, affecting tenants already struggling with the cost of living. As if rising interest rates weren't enough, landlords are also facing a growing mountain of regulations and legislation. The government, quite rightly, wants to improve the quality of rental properties and protect tenants' rights. But for landlords, keeping up with the ever-changing rules and regulations can feel like a full-time job. Energy performance certificates, or EPCs, are a good example. These certificates rate a property's energy efficiency, and from 2025, all new tenancies will require an EPC rating of C or above. While this is a positive step towards a greener future, it means landlords are now under pressure to invest in costly upgrades, from insulation to new boilers, just to meet the minimum standards. And then there's the tenant fees ban, electrical safety checks, and new rules around eviction notices. It's a lot to keep on top of, and even for experienced landlords, it can feel like the goalposts are constantly moving. All this adds up. Time spent understanding the regulations, more time spent finding reliable tradespeople to make improvements, and of course the cost of all those improvements. It's a difficult time to be a tenant at the moment, with the cost of living crisis, meaning many are struggling to make ends meet. But this, in turn, is putting pressure on the landlord-tenant relationship. Landlords are increasingly finding themselves caught in the middle. They sympathize with their tenants' financial struggles, but also have their own financial obligations to meet. It's a delicate balancing act, and when tenants fall behind on rent, it can put landlords in a very difficult position. Of course, most landlords want to be understanding and work with tenants who are genuinely struggling, but rent arrears can have a ripple effect. If a landlord is relying on that rental income to cover their mortgage, for example, it can quickly lead to problems. We also have to acknowledge that, sadly, there are always a small number of tenants who exploit the system. Evicting tenants who refuse to pay rent or cause damage to a property can be a lengthy and expensive process for landlords, often involving court costs and lost rental income. While we often focus on the financial challenges faced by landlords, it's important to remember that it can take an emotional toll too. Being a landlord can be stressful at the best of times, but the current climate is pushing many to their limits. The constant pressure to keep up with regulations, deal with problem tenants, and manage finances can be overwhelming. Many landlords feel like they're on call 24/7, dealing with everything from burst pipes to neighbor disputes. For some landlords, it's simply not worth the hassle anymore. They're selling up and investing elsewhere, choosing peace of mind over the potential for profit. It's understandable, but it does raise concerns about the future of the private rental sector in the UK. Over the past decade, the UK government has introduced tax changes that have made life more difficult for landlords. The phasing out of mortgage interest tax relief has been significant. Landlords now face a much higher tax burden. Coupled with increased stamp duty, profits have dwindled. Fewer landlords mean less choice for tenants and rising rents. Many landlords are ordinary people supplementing their income. These changes have forced some to sell and others to increase rents. Meet Sarah. Sarah inherited her childhood home and decided to rent it out. She hoped it would provide extra income as she approached retirement. But being a landlord was challenging. The house needed modernization, which Sarah paid for. Then the boiler broke down, followed by a leaking roof and rising damp. Sarah juggled repairs and tenant issues. Her tenants fell behind on rent. The arrears mounted. Sarah decided to sell the property. What started as a sentimental investment became a financial drain. While many tenants are struggling in the current economic climate, a new breed of professional tenant has emerged: savvy renters, who know how to play the system to their advantage. These tenants, often well-versed in their rights and the legal complexities of renting, can pose a unique set of challenges for landlords. Professional tenants often move from property to property, staying just long enough to avoid paying a full deposit or exploiting loopholes in tenancy agreements. They may deliberately cause minor damage to a property, knowing that the landlord will be reluctant to pursue legal action due to the time and expense involved. This behavior, while not representative of the majority of renters, can be incredibly frustrating and costly for landlords. It highlights the need for clear, robust tenancy agreements and a more efficient legal system that allows landlords to address genuine cases of tenant misconduct without incurring exorbitant fees or lengthy delays. Generation rent, generation exit. The challenges facing landlords, from rising costs to increased regulation, are contributing to a shrinking private rental sector. This has significant implications for what is often dubbed generation rent, those individuals and families who rely on the private rental sector for housing. As landlords sell up, the supply of rental properties dwindles, leading to increased competition for available homes and driving up rents. This puts further pressure on tenants already grappling with the cost of living crisis and creates a vicious cycle that makes it even harder for people to save for a deposit to buy their own home. The shrinking private rental sector also has broader implications for the UK housing market. As demand outstrips supply, house prices continue to rise, pushing homeownership further out of reach for many, particularly first-time buyers. This exacerbates existing inequalities in wealth and access to housing, creating a system where those who are already struggling find it increasingly difficult to get ahead. A shrinking market. The exodus of landlords from the UK property market is not a trend that can be ignored. It's a clear indication that something is broken in the system, and the consequences are being felt by both landlords and tenants alike. The government needs to find a way to balance the need for greater tenant protection with the need to create a fair and sustainable rental market. This means addressing the concerns of landlords, providing clearer guidance on regulations, and streamlining the legal process for dealing with problem tenants. It also means addressing the wider issue of housing affordability, increasing the supply of affordable housing options, and making it easier for people to get on the property ladder. The future of the UK housing market depends on finding a solution that works for everyone. Ignoring the plight of landlords will only exacerbate the housing crisis, leaving both tenants and landlords worse off. When letting go is the only option. We've talked about the financial pressures, the regulatory hurdles, and the emotional strain. But sometimes, the best way to understand a problem is to hear a real-life story, to to see how these challenges play out in the lives of ordinary people. Meet John and Margaret. They're in their late 60s and have always prided themselves on being financially responsible. They worked hard, paid their taxes, and invested wisely, hoping to enjoy a comfortable retirement. Part of that plan involved purchasing a small buy-to-let property as a way to supplement their pension income. It seemed like a sensible decision at the time. John, a retired engineer, meticulously maintained the property, always ensuring it was in top condition for his tenants. Margaret, a former teacher, handled the administrative side of things, building relationships with tenants and ensuring rent was paid on time. For years, their system worked well. They had reliable tenants, a steady income stream, and the satisfaction of providing a comfortable home for others. John and Margaret's retirement dream was upended. Then the tide began to turn. Mortgage interest tax relief changes hit them hard. Unexpected expenses like a new boiler, upgraded insulation, and winter storm repairs added up. Their long-term tenants relocated for work. Finding new tenants was challenging. Initial applicants were unsuitable. Short-term lets brought more wear and tear, increased administrative burden and uncertainty. John and Margaret felt their retirement dream slipping away. The human cost of a broken system. John and Margaret's story is, sadly, not unique. It's a stark reminder that behind the headlines and statistics are real people, trying to navigate a system that seems increasingly stacked against them. The decision to sell their rental property was a heartbreaking one, but ultimately, they felt they had no other choice. Their story highlights the human cost of a broken system, a system that is pushing out responsible landlords, shrinking the private rental sector, and leaving tenants with fewer housing options and rising rents. It's a vicious cycle that needs to be addressed before it spirals further out of control. It's time to stop viewing landlords as simply profit-driven entities and recognize that many are ordinary people trying to make a living, provide for their families, and secure their future. It's time to have a balanced conversation about the challenges facing both landlords and tenants and find workable solutions that create a fairer, more sustainable housing market for everyone. As we've seen, the challenges facing UK landlords are complex and multifaceted. It's not just about rising interest rates or burdensome regulations. It's about a confluence of factors that have created a perfect storm, pushing many landlords to their breaking point. But this isn't just a landlord problem, it's a housing market problem, and its impact is felt far and wide. When landlords leave the market, the supply of rental properties dwindles. This inevitably leads to increased competition for available homes, pushing up rents and making it even harder for those reliant on the private rental sector to find a decent place to live. It's a classic case of supply and demand, and the current trajectory is unsustainable. Moreover, the exodus of landlords has wider implications for the UK housing market as a whole. As demand for rental properties outstrips supply, it spills over into the sales market, further inflating house prices and pushing home ownership out of reach for many, particularly first-time buyers. So, where do we go from here? The first step is to acknowledge that there's a problem. The government, landlords and tenants need to engage in a meaningful dialogue, one that moves beyond blame and rhetoric and focuses on finding practical solutions. For landlords, this means having their concerns heard and addressed. The government needs to provide greater clarity and consistency around regulations, streamline the legal process for dealing with problem tenants, and consider the impact of tax policies on small-scale landlords. For tenants, it means ensuring their rights are protected, while also understanding the pressures faced by landlords. Open communication, realistic expectations, and a willingness to work together can go a long way in fostering positive landlord-tenant relationships. Ultimately, creating a fairer and more sustainable housing market is a shared responsibility. It requires a shift in perspective, a recognition that everyone involved, landlords, tenants, and policymakers, has a role to play in finding solutions. This includes exploring innovative housing models, such as build-to-rent schemes and co-housing initiatives, which offer alternative pathways to home ownership and provide greater security for renters. It also means investing in affordable housing options and addressing the root causes of the housing crisis, such as low wages and lack of social housing. So what do you think? Have you experienced the challenges of being a landlord in the current market, or are you a tenant facing rising rents and fewer housing options? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's keep this important conversation going. And if you'd like to learn more about tenant rights, property management tips, or other aspects of the UK housing market, check out the links in the description below for more informative videos. Together, we can work towards a fairer, more balanced housing system for everyone.